December 6th, 1917. 4 minutes and 35 seconds past 9 in the morning. A cargo ship in a Canadian harbor becomes the largest explosion human beings have ever created. A record it will hold until the atomic bomb. 10 weeks later, a court names the men responsible. The official story needed a villain. It picked the wrong one. Halifax, Nova Scotia. December 1917. The Great War is in its 4th year, and this harbor is working at wartime pace. Slow convoys assemble in Bedford Basin, the sheltered water at the harbor's inner end, before making the Atlantic crossing. Between the open harbor and the basin, the water pinches into a tight channel with an honest name, the Narrows. Around 65,000 people live in the metropolitan area. On the Halifax side, the working-class Richmond district sits in the city's north end, its houses, schools, and piers facing the water. The SS Mont Blanc is a French steamer of the Compagnie Générale Transatlantique, commanded by Captain Aimé Lemedec. In November 1917, she was chartered to carry military explosives from New York to France, and she has come to Halifax to join a convoy gathering in Bedford Basin. Her cargo is worth pausing on. Roughly 2,300 tons of picric acid, a high explosive more sensitive than TNT, plus hundreds of tons of TNT itself, a quantity of gun cotton, and stowed in barrels on her open deck, the volatile fuel benzol. She is, by any honest description, a floating bomb. Coming the other way is the Emo, a Norwegian steamer chartered by the Commission for Relief in Belgium, a relief ship, which is why history remembers her as the Belgian relief ship, outbound from Bedford Basin and running late, after delays taking on coal. 2 ships, 1 narrow channel, and a morning about to go wrong in the smallest possible way. At about 8:45 in the morning, in the Narrows, Mont Blanc and Emo collide. How they came to meet is the question this story turns on. Witnesses said Emo was moving above the harbor speed limit and out of her expected channel. The 2 ships exchanged whistle signals over who had the right of way, and the signals were disputed. Who was truly at fault would be argued for the next 3 years, and the courts would ultimately find the errors ran both ways. The collision itself is almost gentle, about 1 knot, a walking pace. But it topples and ruptures the benzol barrels on Mont Blanc's deck, and sparks ignite the spilled fuel. Mont Blanc's crew know exactly what is under their feet. They abandon ship and row hard for the Dartmouth shore, shouting warnings that no one on the waterfront can hear or understand in the noise and confusion. Nearly all of them will survive, all but 1 sailor, a 20-year-old gunner, later fatally wounded by debris from the blast. The burning ship drifts toward Pier 6 on the Halifax side. The fire burns for roughly 20 minutes, long enough to become a spectacle. Crowds gather along the waterfront. People stop at their windows to watch. At the Richmond railway station, a train dispatcher named Patrick Vincent Coleman is warned by a sailor about the burning ship's cargo. He stays at his telegraph key to warn the trains coming in. No verbatim transcript of his final message survives. What we have is the accepted reconstruction, and it reads, "Hold up the train. Ammunition ship afire in harbor making for Pier 6 and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys." An overnight passenger train from St. John, carrying as many as 300 people, stops at Rockingham Station, about 6 kilometers short of the terminal. Whether Coleman's message is what stopped it, historians still debate. What is not debated is that Coleman stayed, and that the explosion killed him at his post. At 9:04 and 35 seconds, Mont Blanc explodes. The blast releases energy equivalent to roughly 2.9 kilotons of TNT. It is widely described as the largest human-made explosion before the development of nuclear weapons. The ship simply ceases to exist. Mont Blanc is blown apart entirely, her fragments hurled kilometers from the harbor. Pieces recovered from survivors' homes sit today in the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic. The explosion pushes the harbor itself out of its bed. A tsunami rises as high as 18 meters above the high water mark on the Halifax side. It carries the Emo, the other ship, clean out of the water and onto the Dartmouth shore. On land, nearly every structure within 800 meters is obliterated, and the Richmond district bears the brunt of it. More than 12,000 buildings are destroyed or damaged. Some 6,000 people are left homeless. Across the water, nearly 100 people die on the Dartmouth side. and the Micmac settlement at Turtle Grove is devastated. 9 bodies recovered, and only 11 survivors known. The count of the dead deserves honesty. The Nova Scotia Archives Remembrance book, the official database compiled decades later, identifies 1,782 victims by name. The real toll is higher. More than 1,600 died instantly. Official counts of the era reached over 1,900, and estimates run to about 2,000 because many of the dead were never identified at all. Around 9,000 more are injured, in a metropolitan area, remember, of 65,000. And there is one injury the Halifax explosion is grimly famous for. All those people watching from their windows were watching through glass, and the shockwave shattered it into their faces. Ophthalmologists treated 592 people for eye injuries. 249 eyes could not be saved. 16 people lost both. By the following June, about 40 people were recorded as totally blind. Then the next morning, as rescuers dug, a blizzard. 16 inches of heavy snow fell on the ruins, hampering rescue and relief. A city in ruins wants an answer. In wartime, it already had a suspect. Within days, rumors of German sabotage swept Halifax. The inquiries found the cause was the collision, and historians say the sabotage rumors were unfounded. But the appetite for a villain was real. 1 week after the explosion, a wreck commissioner's inquiry under Justice Arthur Drysdale opened at the Halifax courthouse. Its report, delivered February 4, 1918, gave the city its villains. It blamed Mont Blanc's captain, Aimé Le Medec, the harbor pilot, Francis Mackey, and Commander F. Evan Wyatt, the naval officer in charge of harbor traffic. 3 names, all of them attached to the ship that exploded or to the harbor that let her in. None of them from the EMO. The 3 men faced charges including manslaughter and criminal negligence. Not one of them was convicted. A Nova Scotia Supreme Court Justice, Benjamin Russell, found no evidence to support the charges, and they were dropped. Then the civil courts went back through the mourning, whistle by whistle. On May 19, 1919, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that Mont Blanc and IMO were equally to blame for the navigational errors that caused the collision. On March 22, 1920, the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, the highest court in the British Empire, agreed. Equal fault. Both ships. The Empire's final court looked at the disaster that had a villain assigned within 10 weeks and ruled that the first official answer was wrong. The same night as the explosion, around 10 p.m., Boston dispatched a relief train north, loaded with doctors, nurses, and medical supplies. The blizzard slowed it. It arrived on the morning of December 8th. Halifax did not forget. In 1918, the city sent Boston a Christmas tree in thanks, and since 1971, Nova Scotia has sent one every single year. It stands on Boston Common as the city's official Christmas tree. The flattened Richmond district was rebuilt in part as the Hydrostone. 326 homes along tree-lined boulevards planned by Thomas Adams with the architects Ross and MacDonald. And the war did not pause. Harbor convoys resumed within about a week. The Narrows is still there. Ships still pass through it, one at a time, past a rebuilt shoreline. Every December, a tree from Nova Scotia goes up in Boston, and the verdict that stands, the one that survived every appeal, names no villain at all. 2 ships, 1 channel, and errors on both sides. The official story needed someone to blame. The record, in the end, refused to provide one.